Hey, what's going on everyone? I am DB, and remember that Chrome extension? Let's actually make it do something. Okay, so last we left off we made a Chrome extension, but the Chrome extension didn't do a whole lot. So let's take a quick look at what we did before we get started again. So we're just going to do what we normally do. We're going to open this up with our IDE. And now we're back to where we were. So just a reminder, kind of where we left off, we made it's a simply hello world. And let's go ahead and build this. So we're going to go ahead and cd to our desktop and our tasker folder. And we're going to go to tasker once more. So now we are in desktop, tasker, and then we're just going to simply do an ng build to make sure that our application can build. And then once it's done building, then we're going to do ngserve-o. ngserve-o simply allows us to see the output instantly, so it should just pop open our browser so we can see our results. And we can see that it says hello world here. So the next thing that we want to do is display this in a Chrome extension. So if I open up Chrome and we go to Chrome ://extensions, we can see that we have Tasker here. And if we open Tasker, we can see our hello world, just like what we saw before. So that's kind of where we left off. So now that we finished recapping, let's go over what we want Tasker to do. So we want to be able to create notes that can be loaded and deleted as we need, directly from the application that we create. One of the things that we're going to want to install is the Angular material library, which is going to actually help us make this look nice without a lot of effort. So let's go ahead and go over to material.angular.io/guide/getting-started. That's a mouthful. Don't worry, I'll throw this in the links below. So go ahead and look to the links so you can get this copied. The reason why we're coming here though is because we want to get this command in particular where it says ng-add angular material. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. We're going to open our terminal back up that we had before, and it looks like I still have a process. So I'm going to kill that with Control-C. Let's go ahead and paste the ng-add command, and let's give it a run. So what this is going to do is this is going to add the Angular material library. So it's going to ask us, do we want this to be executed? I'm going to say yes. Okay, so it's asking us to go with the color theme here. You can go with whatever color theme that you like. I'm going to go with indigo pink just to keep things basic. And do we want to set up typography styles? I'm going to say no. And then we're also going to include and enable animations. That's fine. And then once we have that installed, now we can use the material library. So that's not going to come into huge play just yet, but once we start writing some code, you're going to see how that's going to affect our application. Speaking of our code, let's go ahead and hop back over to our IDE now. Okay, now it's finally time for us to write some code. So I'm going to show you just how I would do this, but I'll add in the explanations in between. Hopefully that'll help make some sense along the way. So the first thing that I would like to do at this point is I would like to create a folder for our navigation bar that we're going to create for our Chrome extension. So let's go ahead and go to new folder, and we're going to call this folder Navbar. Now there's 3 files that we're going to need to put in here, so let's go ahead and put them in. First is going to be a TypeScript file, so we'll call this navbar.ts. We're going to do another new file. We're going to call this one navbar.css, which is going to handle all the different stylings. And then let's go ahead and do one more, navbar.html, which is going to handle the look and feel of our Chrome extension. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to cheat. I'm going to go to appcomponent.ts, and I'm going to copy all of the code from here. And then I'm going to go back to navbar.ts, and we're going to paste that code into here. So you might be asking yourself why I did that. Well, first, whenever you have a TypeScript file in an Angular application, that's going to be the business logic for your code. And in this file here, that's going to be the business logic for our navbar. You might be asking the question now, but all of this says app because it's from app root and it's from app.component, all that fun stuff. How is this going to apply to our navbar? To put it simply, we can simply just replace a lot of what says app with navbar. So I'll just go ahead and do Control F to find everything. And then we can just do a quick replace. So I can just say replace all. And now it says navbar everywhere I wanted to. And we're just going to make a couple more adjustments. So for example, this selector, I want it to just be navbar. And then also, we don't have navbar component HTML. We're going to have navbar.html. And then finally, for here, it's going to be the same. So we're going to remove that as well. And now this is starting to look a little bit more like our very own navbar class. So before I continue though, I do want to do a quick breakdown of the structure of the TypeScript app. So in terms of the business logic, the first set of lines that we're going to have at the top is going to be our import lines. This is where we're bringing in everything that we're going to use within our application for this particular component. And that's what we're working on here too, which is a nice segue to the next line, our component decorator. So basically what the component decorator is a description for everything that makes up the component that you are building. So for our navbar component, we have what's called a selector, and we're calling that navbar. You might be asking yourself, what exactly does that do? Well, if I go over to say app.component.html, remember how we had hello world here? We can actually use our navbar selector instead. So let's go ahead and open up a caret, and I'm going to put navbar here, and then we're going to bookend it with a navbar as well. So there looks like there's two, so let's clean that up. You may notice that navbar here has got a red underline, and that's because our application doesn't know that our navbar component exists yet. How do we let it know that it exists? We're going to go to the app.module.ts file. Now, the reason why we're going to come to here is because think of the module file as the manifest for your application. The module file is where you declare everything that your application is going to have and use, even for things that you've created or something that's been created by someone else. So remember how I say we declare it? Here's our declarations in here, and you can already see the app component is already declared here. So if I go back to my navbar file really quickly, you'll notice that we called our class navbar component, and we're going to declare it the exact same way. So we're going to declare it by taking the class name, and we're going to go back to app module, and we're going to simply drop this in our declarations here. And now it's saying, hey, wait a second, you just told me about this new thing, but you haven't defined it anywhere. I don't know where to look for this thing. So let's tell it where to look. Similarly to how we have our app component here, let's go ahead and do our navbar component too. So I'm just going to copy this and paste this line, but we're going to make a couple changes. So instead of app component, we're going to change this to navbar component. And then obviously it's not going to be in the same file location. It's going to be one further than what we had. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a /, and then remember we created a navbar folder. So we'll say navbar. And then we're going to do another /, and then our TypeScript file is navbar.ts. But the cool thing about Angular is for our TypeScript files, whenever we're importing them, we don't have to do navbar.ts. Actually, you could just simply put navbar and it'll pick it up. And notice that once I've actually told the manifest or the module file where to find the navbar, it stopped complaining. And if we go back to the HTML as well, you can see that it is no longer complaining here either. But our navbar still doesn't do a whole lot. So let's go back to our navbar file. We can actually get rid of this title. So let's go ahead and get rid of the title. And we're going to add our own code here over time. So don't worry too much just yet. But one thing I want to point out is we have our template URL, which is where our HTML file is going to live. We're going to put our code into here, and we're going to say hello world again. Actually, this time we're going to say hello Navbar. So let's go ahead and do that. So if I click here, I'm just going to do a simple h1 tag, and then I'm just going to say hello Navbar. Make sure that we've saved the work that we've done so far. You could either do Control K or go to File, Save All. Now we want to go ahead and rebuild this one more time. So let's go ahead and do ng build. Now our file's going to build, our project's going to build. And then once the project is done building, we're going to go to the distribution folder from previous that we've used before to reload our application into the Chrome extension. We could see that we got a successful build here. So let's go ahead and open up Chrome. And I already went ahead and deleted the old one. So make sure you can click remove on it, just like you see here. Let's go to load unpacked. And we can see that we're already in the folder. So I'm just going to go ahead in my instance and click the distribution folder and then click tasker. But know that you could find it just straight off of your desktop. So go ahead and click select folder. And now we can see tasker is back. So I'm going to open tasker like we did before. And now you can see hello Navbar. So we actually created a separate component now that's going to handle our Navbar stuff that we need to put into our application. So with that being done, let's actually make our Navbar do something useful. First, let's change the size of our application window because I want to make it a little bigger so it can look nicer. Go ahead and open your IDE, and then we're going to go back to app.component.html. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a div tag with a class, and we're going to wrap this around the Navbar. So let's go ahead and create a class now, and we're just going to simply call this class window. So that way we can say it represents the viewing window. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to go back to our app.component.css file. And in here, we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of CSS. We're just going to say .window, open and close curly brackets, and then we're going to create a height. And the height is going to just say 500 pixels. And the width will also be 500 pixels. Oops, it would help if I put a semicolon. So just make sure to put the height and width. And then now we can have a window that'll be a little bit better sized for us. So let's continue. So now one of the things that I like to do whenever I'm working with a particular library is look up the documentation to help make my life easier. So let's go ahead, and I want you to do a Google search for Angular Material Library. And we're going to simply go to the one where it's material.angular.io. Now, this is the Angular Material Library. It has a ton of useful documentation about all of the different material components. So let's actually go to the top left and open their components location. And here are all of the different components that you can see from the Angular Material Library. One thing that the Angular Material Library actually does a very good job of is showing you what things are going to look like beforehand and give you documentation about how to make things work together. So since our Navbar is going to exist and we want it to look pretty cool, one thing you could do is you could obviously simply scroll through until we find a Navbar. And actually we did find something similar to what we're looking for. So if you look, we have a toolbar here. So also, just the word to the wise, on the left hand side of the website you can also see that it has a sidebar which allows you to explore this as well. I usually like to use the sidebar. So from here, let's go ahead and click toolbar on the left hand side. So this is going to give you a quick example of what the toolbar looks like. So I'm going to go straight to the API so I can see exactly how to use this. And it tells me that in order to use the Angular Material toolbar, I have to do an import. So this is the thing that I'm going to copy first. So let's go ahead and give this a copy. And we're going to go back now to our application. And remember that manifest, that module file I told you about where we have to tell the application what we're going to use? We're going to tell it here as well. So let's go ahead and import our mat toolbar module that we have straight off of their API. And remember, since I said we're importing, we're going to want to put it into our imports location. So I'm going to go ahead and put mat toolbar module. And if I hit tab, it looks like autocomplete will let me do that. So now I see that I have mat toolbar module here. Okay, let's go back to the toolbar documentation so that way we can take a look at exactly how we can make our toolbar. Let's go ahead and open it up. And let's go to the examples that they have here. And we can see a quick basic example that they have. Let's go ahead and click in the upper right corner where it has a link out to StackBlitz. This is going to allow us to see their code. On the left-hand side, you can see the files that they use to make this example, but we're only interested in their HTML file because that's what we're going to use to put the toolbar in. You can see that they have a lot of code here for their toolbar. We're going to copy it and change some of it. So go ahead and give this a copy, and then we're going to go back down and open up our project. Let's go to navbar.html, and we're going to replace what we have and put what they have. Now you may notice that there's some red underlines under mat icon. It's because we haven't told our Angular project about mat icon at the moment, just like we didn't tell it about the toolbar earlier. So there's two ways we can solve this. We can just simply add our mat icon into our imports that we had before, or we could just remove it. I'm going to remove this for now because honestly we don't need a lot of this at the moment, so let's just cut this out. All we want to keep is the mat toolbar tags, just as you see. So let's go ahead and also add a little bit of color to this, because right now it's just going to be kind of like a plain white color, and that's cool, but for the most part I just want to give this a little flavor. So we're going to go color equals primary. Now remember earlier when we picked the theme and we kind of glossed over it, it said indigo pink is our theme. Well, indigo is the primary color for the indigo pink theme. So by saying color primary here, we're saying, hey, take that indigo color and use it for this toolbar. Okay, I'm going to save this now. Let's go ahead and build. And then after this is done building, let's load our application and see what it looks like. And it should be finishing now. Good. So let's go ahead and open up Chrome. We're going to go ahead and we're going to remove this. So this time I'm going to remove it, but just know that you could update it actually if you'd like to. Let's go ahead and hit load unpacked. Go to the distribution folder and take Tasker, just like we did before. Okay, so Tasker's back. Let's open it up and see what it looks like. That doesn't look very enticing to me. In fact, I don't even see indigo, and I don't even see the name Tasker. Mainly because I deleted the name Tasker. Let's go back and look at our code real quick. So one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to put the span tag here. So if I put span Tasker, now it should actually load the name, and let's see what happens if I do that. So let's rebuild this, and let's reload this time. So this time I'm actually just going to hit this little reload button. So now you see it says reloaded. And we're going to open it one more time. Now this doesn't look at all what we anticipated, but it's mainly because of an error that I've been glossing over. So let's take a look at this error button that it says right here. And it says that it refused to execute an inline event. So did you notice how our styles and things weren't loading properly, especially when we put Tasker? Well, there's something that we have to do to fix that. And the primary reason for this is because of how Angular loads its CSS elements. So if we go to this GitHub page, you don't have to worry about it. I'll throw it in the links below. There is a comment here where they actually have a fix for this. It's a little optimization that we're going to copy over. So I'm going to take this and we're going to open up our angular.json file. So let's go back and let's find angular.json. And we're going to want to drop this under our build options. So here's our build. Here's the options. So pretty much anywhere in here. I'm going to put it right after the scripts tag. So I'll put a comma. We're going to drop it there and we're going to save it. We'll remove that little comma that they have there. So just to give you a second in case, we have optimizations, scripts true, styles, and then after that we have the attributes minify and inline critical equals false. So this should fix the issue that we're running into. So let's build it again and see what happens. Let's go back to Chrome. We're going to go ahead and clear all these errors that we had. And we're going to just simply reload it like this. This time we're going to hit the little reload arrow. And let's go up here, Tasker, and look at that. We have our navbar. Okay, now that we've actually created a navbar, let's actually make our app do something. So let's go ahead and go back to our application. We're pretty much done at this point with navbar, but we do need to create a new folder. I'm just going to collapse the navbar folder for the moment. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go and right click on the app folder, and we're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call this Notes. So inside of the Notes folder, we're going to do the same thing we did with navbar. We're going to make our 3 files. So it's going to be new file is going to be notes.ts. Next is going to be notes.css. And then finally, we're going to have notes.html. Now, if you're familiar with what we did before, all we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and go, let's say, to our navbar. And we're going to copy over our navbar component that we have here into our notes. And we're going to change everything from navbar. So we'll do a Control F and we're going to type navbar. And we're going to replace that with notes. And do a replace all. And then finally, I'm just going to capitalize the N for the notes class and then save this. Before we move on, let's go ahead and add our notes component into our app component.html so we can render whatever we do in our notes component. So let's go ahead and click on app.component.html. And then in here, underneath the navbar, we're going to go ahead and put our notes component just like that. Make sure to give it a save. And now we can continue. Okay, so now we created our notes component, but we also have to tell it to our module, just like we did before. So let's go ahead and go back to the app module. And just like what we did with the navbar component, we're going to copy the import statement, move this down, change it from navbar to notes. And then same thing here. We're going to change these both to say notes. And then finally, we're going to declare our notes component by saying notes component with the tab autocomplete. And you can see just like that, now we already have a notes component. We did that in probably what, 15 seconds? No, I'm just kidding. With that, let's go ahead and continue to build out this notes component. Let me give you a description first of what we want our notes component to do. So basically what we want our notes component to do is we want to be able to allow our users to write a note that they can save, that they can also retrieve and see kind of like in a list, and then delete them when they don't want them anymore. So the way we're going to do that is with something called cookies, and we're going to actually snatch those cookies from the internet. So to get that, we're going to have to install the cookies library into our Angular application. So let's go ahead and open up our browser. And now the thing I'm going to look for is ngx-cookieservice. And don't worry, this is actually going to be in the links for you, so it'll be even easier than I'm doing right now. So now that I have this here, I'm looking for the installation instructions for this, and I can see that it's right here. So I'm going to copy this right here. And we're going to open up my command prompt again, making sure that we're in the correct directory here. Let's go ahead and give this an install. So we're going to copy and paste this over. There we go. So now it's going to install the ngx-cookieservice. Now that we've done that, how do we use it? Well, the cool thing about this is if we scroll right down, we can actually see exactly how to use it. It tells us how to do our import. So we're going to import this just like we did before. We're going to copy this, go back to our application. We're going to paste this, and I'm going to paste it underneath all of our stuff. And we're just going to make it a little cleaner. So notice our providers is empty here. If I go back and I look, in order to get cookie service, we have to paste it just like they have there. I could have wrote cookie service, but being a programmer, I'm lazy. So now we have our cookie service here. So let's go ahead and give this a save. And the next thing I just want to do really quick is I just want to do a quick ng build to see if this is working properly still. Okay, everything built successfully, so that's a good sign. Let's go ahead and continue. So the next thing we want to do is hop back over to our notes component and make some changes. So let's go ahead and go to notes.ts. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is create a constructor. So we're going to go ahead and create a constructor. And then inside our parentheses of our constructor, we're going to want to pass a private version of our cookie service. So let's go ahead and do that. Private cookie service :cookie service. And just so you notice up at the top, it actually created a import of our cookie service. I just don't want you to miss that. So now that we have that in our constructor, let's start to think about what we're going to need for our note-taking app. Well, one of the most important things that we're going to need is notes. So let's go ahead and create an array of notes. So I'm just going to go ahead and create an array. We're going to call this notes, and it's going to be a string array, and it's going to be empty to start. Okay, so beyond the notes, the other things that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to save a note, and we're also going to want to remove a note. So let's make two functions that'll do that for us. So first one's going to be save note. And in order to save a note, you have to have a note to pass in. So we're going to call this note, and this is going to be a string. And the return is going to be a void, which is why we put :void there, because all we're going to do is alter that string array that we have. So remember, the other thing we're going to want to do is also remove a note. So we're going to call this remove note. And then in order to remove a note, we're going to want to pass in an index of the note that we're going to delete. So we're going to say index number. And then also this is going to be a void as well. Okay, there's two more functions that we're going to need to make in order to complete the functions we need. So remember, we want to save to our cookie service and load from our cookie service. So the first function we're going to call save to cookies. It's not going to take any parameters, and it's also going to be a void function. And simply all we want to do is take our notes and save it to the cookies. So we're going to say this.cookieservice.set. We're going to pass notes. So we're going to do that by calling our little identifier here notes. And now we have to pass our notes. This takes a string. So in order for us to pass it as a string, we're going to have to convert this to JSON. So I'm going to say json.stringify notes. So what that is going to do is going to take our notes, and it's going to turn it into a JSON string so that later we can parse it back and get it the way we need it. So now that we have the save to cookies, let's go ahead and get load from cookies. It's going to take no parameters, and it's also going to be a void function. And this one's going to be easy as well. All we're going to do is say this.notes is equal to this.cookieservice.get, and then we're going to say notes, which is what we called it. Now you'll notice that there's still an error here. Remember how I was talking about we had to take it from JSON to convert it back? Well, the way we're going to do that now is by saying json.parse and just throw some parentheses around it. And this is going to save to our cookies, and this is going to load from our cookies. So we have our two functions that we need finally. Now we're going to want actually one more function, and this one is a lifecycle function called ngx-cookieservice. This is going to allow our service to load our notes as soon as the service fires up. So let's go ahead and create that. I usually do it just below the constructor. So let's say ngx-cookieservice. This isn't going to take anything. It's also going to be a void. And all it's going to do is call this.load from cookies. And that's it. We just want to make sure that we actually pass in our ngx-cookieservice lifecycle function into our Angular core import. So we're going to say on init. And then we're just going to want to make sure that our class says that it implements the onInit method. So we're going to say implements onInit. By saying that, Angular knows that we're implementing onInit, and you can see right here that we're implementing onInit. Okay, let's complete the save note and remove note functions that we have. Actually, let's go ahead and change save note to be add note, simply because I don't want to have two functions with the same start, which is save note and save to cookies. So we'll change this to add note, so that way it's a little bit more distinct. Okay, so for add note, basically what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add a note to the end of the array, and we're going to do that by typing this dot notes dot push, and we're going to push our note. Now after we do that, we're going to want to go ahead and save our notes to the cookies. So we're going to call this dot save to cookies, and that's perfect. Next, we're going to want to do our remove note. So for this one, we're going to do this dot notes dot splice. Hey there, Dino from way in the future here. I wanted to show you this really quick because I made a mistake and I needed to fix it. So this dot notes dot splice, originally what I did is I passed index, but I didn't pass a stopping point. So it needs a second variable in order to stop. And because I didn't pass the second variable to splice, what ended up happening was if you clicked the delete on the very first item in the list, it just did a chain delete because you didn't give it a stopping point. So you see how in this here it says delete count number, which is an optional value. So if you pass 1, it'll only delete 1. But if you don't pass anything, it just assumes that it can delete everything. Yeah. You're welcome. But no, that's all I got. I just wanted to make sure I showed you this. So I'm going to pass this back to Dino from about, 6, 7, 8 months ago now? Thanks, everyone. And we're going to splice by our index that we have, which will remove the note that we have. And again, we're going to want to save this to our cookies. So we're going to say this dot save to cookies. Okay, cool. So now that we've got our functions done, let's focus on our HTML and we'll be ready to wrap up. So there's 3 things that I want to get because I know we're going to need them. The first is going to be mat buttons, the second is going to be an input, and the third is going to be a card. So let's get all 3 of those imported. So we're going to go back over to our Angular material library, and let's see, here is card. So let's go ahead and get the import for that by going to API and copying this over. And we're going to go back to app module TS, and we're going to import this. So right behind our toolbar, we'll go ahead and import that. Let's go ahead and do the other ones as well. So we need button, so we're going to grab button as well. And we're going to go back over, and we're going to drop the import there. And then the last one we're going to need is going to be our input. So we're going to go to input, API, and we're going to import this as well. Okay, so let's get all 3 of those in our input box here. So we're going to do mat button first. So we'll say mat button. Then we'll say mat card. And then we'll say mat input. Perfect. We got our new additions. So let's go ahead and start working on our HTML. So we're going to go to notes.html. Okay, so let's work on adding a note. So to add a note, we're going to make a div tag, and we're going to give this a class just to kind of keep things clean. So this class is going to be add note. And then inside of here, we're going to want our input. So we're going to say input mat input type equals text. And then we're also going to want to put our add item button. So we're going to say button mat button. And then we're going to make this a color primary again. So we'll say color equals primary. It'll give it a nice white and blue look. And then we're going to call this add item. So that way we can identify it quickly. And then finally, let's put this in a span tag so that way we can wrap this and make sure that they're on the same line together. So we'll put that into a span just like that, and we'll tab these over so it's a little clean. Okay, so that's how we're going to add an item. But now let's work on displaying items. So the next part's going to be our display. So we're going to call this div, and we're going to call this class display notes. And then within this div, let's go ahead and actually, it didn't create my div automatically for me, so let's create it. And within this div, we're going to want to do just like some different cards to display our notes. So one way we can do that is by doing a for loop. So we're going to do that with ng-for. And if you've never used this before, don't worry about it. I'll walk you through it. So we're going to say let note of notes, because remember our array is called notes. So we're saying let each individual note of notes. We're going to put a semicolon, and then we're going to say let let I equal index, and that's going to let us have the identifier for our each individual notes that we're going to post. So let's go ahead and make cards for each one of our notes. So we're going to say mat card, and then let's add a span tag for our message. So we're going to say span, and then we're going to do our note as we defined above. And then we're also going to do a span tag for our button. And then in here, we're going to say button, mat button. This one we're going to give a fancy color. We're going to say worn, so that way it looks cool and red and lets you know that it's dangerous. So we're going to say delete. Okay, so now we've basically created what we need. We've created our buttons and everything, but there's one last problem, and you've probably caught on to it. What's calling our functions? So let's go ahead and get our functions called. So now that we've got a bunch of different identifiers and attributes in here, let's go ahead and add one more for the button here. So when we click the add item button, we're going to want it to do something to save our note. And what I'm going to do now is add a click. So that way when the user clicks this, it's going to call a function. And then this function that it's going to call is going to be add note. And we're going to want to pass it something. But unfortunately, I didn't give it something to pass. So one way that you can do that with an input tag is by giving it a hashtag name. I'm not sure if that's the actual proper name for it. But what I'm going to do is call this note to add. And then this is going to allow us to access it from the HTML itself. So now inside of my parentheses here, I can say note to add dot value. Now the reason why I need to say dot value is because it is an HTML element. If you just tried to do note to add, it would pass an object and not the actual value. So this is how we extract the value. And similarly to the button down below for worn, what we're going to want to do is add a click handler here for when we do a delete. And then this one is going to do remove note. But this one's going to be much easier because we've already set up our index I. So all we have to do is pass the index I, and that should work. But there's one last thing that I forgot to mention, and let's go back to our notes.ts so we can take a look. So the issue that I could foresee happening is when we try to load our notes from the cookies, if there is no notes to load, then this is going to fail. So let's just make sure that we do a check that there is notes. So we're just going to say if this.cookieservice.check, and we're going to check for notes. If it has it, then we're going to want to go into this if block and execute. Otherwise, we don't want to load anything because there's nothing to load. Okay, so now that we've done all that, let's build this and see what we have. So I'm going to go ahead and run a build. And now what we're going to do is we're going to open up Chrome and then we're going to refresh what we have. Let's go ahead and open up Tasker. It's looking good so far. We got a little box here. Let's actually type a note. And would you look at that? We've got a little note there. So let's see if we can add more. So we're going to say note 2 or 23. Go Michael Jordan. To be fair, let's do note 24 for Kobe Bryant. Awesome. It looks like it's working. So let's go ahead now and try to do our deletes. So let's go ahead and delete. That worked. Okay, so here's a very, very important thing we did. Remember how I said that we were going to use the cookie service to save our notes? So let's close the application by just clicking away. And then let's reopen it to see if it has those 2 notes. And sure enough, it does. So now we actually have a working Chrome extension that actually does something. Now it's not perfect, and as you can see, it could probably use a little bit of love in terms of styling. But the most important thing is it actually works the way we intend it to work. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Dino in the future. That's a wrap for this tutorial. I hope you had a lot of fun and you learned stuff along the way. You may have noticed that the color of my clothes have probably changed a little bit. I don't know, maybe I shot this over 2 days, maybe I didn't. Who knows?
You'll never get the truth out of me.
If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down below in the comments. Other than that, I am DB, you are you. Let's keep rocking, let's keep learning. Peace!